Welcome to Campbell House Museum. I'm Liz Driver, the Director-Curator of this wonderful historic house museum at the northwest corner of Queen Anne University in downtown Toronto. We're very pleased to welcome you to a new exhibition of the paintings of the artist Anong Migwans Beam. Now, tonight is a virtual tour, but the exhibit is open until December 19th, and we really hope that sometime over the next 2 months, you'll also stop by and visit the exhibit in person. First, I'd like to give a land acknowledgement, as is appropriate. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on as the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with Mississaugas of the Credit. I'll now introduce Elka Weinstein, the curator of this exhibit. Dr. Weinstein is currently the Vice President of ICON Canada and is the past president of the board of the art gallery space at the museum in order to broaden its appeal to visitors. Elka also curated the very first contact photography exhibition at Campbell House. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Anong Migwans Beam, the artist. Anong has been painting since 1999 and has been exhibited in group and solo shows in galleries across Canada. Anong's paintings are held in the permanent collections of art galleries in New Brunswick, New York, Nova Scotia, and Ontario. Anong's paintings speak to her life and work on Manitoulin Island, where she grew up as the daughter of two artists, Carl Beam and Anne Beam. In 1998, Anong attended the visual arts program at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. She then attended the Ontario College of Art and Design from 1999 to 2000 and the Institute of American Indian Arts in 2001. She is currently a master's student at York University. In addition to her artistic work, Anong has been actively involved in her local community and is well known for her curatorial work. In 2007, Anong was one of the founders of Gima Radio Communications, an English and Ojibwe language radio station in Chagin First Nation. The station focuses on Ojibwe language preservation and local Indigenous musical performances. From 2016 to 2017, Anong served as the art director of the Ojibwe Cultural Foundation, and in 2017, she transitioned to become the foundation's executive director. In 2017, Anong also launched her own line of watercolor and oil paints known as Beam Paints. The minerals and pigments for these paints are all locally sourced by her on Manitoulin Island. The paints are now available online and at Indigo stores and online sales. And now, over to Elka for the tour.
Hello. Nice to see everyone here tonight. Welcome to the walkthrough tour of the Anong Migwans Beam exhibit. I'm going to start in the entrance hallway of Campbell House Museum, where Anong's first painting appears as you walk in the front door. So Anong's artistic work is influenced by where she lives, and many of her paintings are connected to her home on Manitoulin Island. Camp Cadillac, which is the painting that you're looking at, is a romantic painting in the sense of a romantic nostalgia for the way things might have been in the past. The Cadillac is a vintage car. Anong is interested in vintage cars, and her family once owned a Cadillac, as well as several other prestige luxury vehicles when they could afford them. The camp in Anong's paintings is an homage to Peter Doig's Camp Forestia, a famous painting by the Scottish-born, Canadian-raised artist. Anong is a great admirer of Doig's, and this painting and several others feature this little building with lighted windows in the forest. Camp Cadillac includes many small birds, referencing Anong's middle name, Migwans, which was her father's traditional surname. He was born Carl Edwards Migwans in 1943 on Shigit First Nation. Migwans means little bird or feather, and Carl's mother, Barbara Migwans, was the daughter of the hereditary chief of the Ojibwe of West Bay, now Chagin First Nation. I also wanted to point out that the painting, although it is thoroughly contemporary, incorporates floral elements which echo the wallpaper behind it. That wallpaper is a Brunswick Fils chinoiserie print and can also be found on the walls of the bathrooms at the Royal York Hotel in downtown Toronto, and in the 1989 movie Uncle Buck, which stars the late John Candy, Amy Madigan, and Macaulay Culkin. This is the withdrawing room, also called the parlor sometimes. I want to draw your attention to the depictions of water in the prints and paintings in this room. Water is a huge theme in Anong Beam's work. It is featured in almost all of her paintings in this show. Water as a source of life is important to all Anishinaabe people, but it is particularly important on Manitoulin Island, the biggest freshwater island in the world where Anong lives and paints. Two important Indigenous women from Wickwemikung First Nation on Manitoulin are water walkers and protectors. Josephine Mandamin, a water activist who walked 17,000 miles around the Great Lakes over 10 years, carrying a bucket of water to bring attention to pollution in the lakes. Josephine died in early 2019, but her great niece, Autumn Peltier, carries on the tradition and the fight. In 2018, Autumn told the United Nations General Assembly, "It is time to warrior up, stop polluting the planet, and give water the same rights and protections as human beings." She also said, "Many people don't think water is alive or has a spirit. My people believe this to be true." Water does seem to have a spirit in Anung's work, and it certainly has a presence. So I'm going to go slowly around the room and show you some of the water pictures. And we're also going to include, I'm also including some of the prints, the colonial style prints that are in the withdrawing room, because they also have water in them. And early depictions of Canada were very, were focused in some ways on water as well. So these two prints, one is called New Bridge on the River Jacques-Cartier, and this one is a view of the lower falls of La Puce. I'm going to carry on to the alcove. In the alcove, this painting by Anong Beam is called Wanderer North Sea, after Wanderer Above a Sea of Fog, an oil painting from 1818 by the German romantic artist Caspar David Friedrich. It's been considered one of the masterpieces of Romanticism and one of its most representative works. Okay, we're going to carry on to a wonderful depiction of Niagara Falls. The Falls at Niagara is by James Pattison Coburn, a lieutenant colonel in Upper Canada. Like Lady Simcoe, who accompanied her husband to Canada in 1791 and left us such a wonderful legacy of watercolor paintings, letters, and sketches of Upper Canada, James Coburn was taught to produce topographical maps, but extended his course to include watercolor landscape paintings, such as this charming depiction of a formally dressed group of people, perhaps a bridal party or family picnicking at Niagara Falls. We have paired Falls at Niagara with Anung's wonderful painting called Beaver Dam Overflowing. Beaver Dam Overflowing started life as a depiction of an iceberg. It is a triumph of water overflowing a beaver dam in the middle of the woods. The flowing water swirls into the space between the canvas and the viewer, leaving the darkness behind it as it moves through the air. Compared with the Falls at Niagara, the Beaver Dam celebrates the wilderness without unnecessary humans. And I'll move up a little bit so that you can have a good look at Beaver Dam. So we're going to leave the withdrawing room now, and I'm going to go into the dining room. And into the dining room. The dining room is one of the formal rooms and the domain of the lady of the house. It is therefore fitting that we have chosen a floral motif for this room that is both floral, formal, and natural. Catherine Parr Traill's Canadian Wildflowers was one of several books that she wrote about Canadian botany. Illustrated with prints by her niece, Agnes Dunbar Moody Fitzgibbon, daughter of Susanna Moody, the book went through 4 reprints between 1868 and 1895. These prints are reproductions from the 1869 edition, and this is the frontispiece of the book. The prints were loaned to Campbell House by Lambton House, an historic inn in West Toronto that is cared for by Heritage York. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the prints, which are at either end of the room, to give you a good look. And I'm going to give you a look at the one in the corner over here. And by contrast, Anong Beam's watercolors of flowers are just as closely observed as Catherine Parr Traill's, but they are not meant as botanical studies. The lady slipper flower, the cowslip, the trillium are natural entities and meant to be appreciated for themselves. And I'm going to move over to the other ones on the other side of the mantle to give you a good look at those. Wintergreen, the lily, and the bugloss, and the other peony. There we go. Okay. And there are the Agnes Fitzgibbon Moody prints on the opposite wall. And moving slowly, there's another print. Give you a little look at the lovely china in the cabinet, and moving out into the hallway again. Okay. I'm going to walk up the stairs and take you into the upper hallway. This is what you would be seeing if you were in the house and walking up the stairs to the main upper hallway. Give you a view of that. And another one of Anong's wonderful paintings. The people associated with the Moose Dodim or Ojibwe clan are craftsmen and artists, and therefore the moose in this context is very appropriate. Albino moose are rare, so this one could be considered a spirit animal. A similar tribute to Doig's Camp Forestia also appears in this painting, but here the forest is darker and more mysterious, adding to the ghostly appearance of a white moose. Animals appear more often than people in Anong's paintings, adding to the sense of attachment to the land and the forest. Okay, I'm going to turn around, give you another view of the hallway and of the lovely model of York. For people who are coming here to visit in person, there's also a little video of several of Anong's videos from her Instagram, from Beam Paints. And now I'm in the ballroom. Okay, I'm going to give you a view of the ballroom in a panorama view. And the painting over the mantle. and Deluge. And I'm going to talk about the paintings in this room. All of the paintings in this gallery are painted with Anong's own paints, made in her workshop with all of the basic ingredients gathered by her on Manitoulin Island. Like many of her father's paintings, Anong's also often include dye transfers, in which photographs become part of the painting substrate on the canvas. Almost all of the largest canvases, Mountain Lake, Red Mangrove, and Deluge, also include dye transfers. The painting that you're looking at right now is called Spring Bay Mennonite Barn, and it's one of Anong's most recent works. The elements of the painting are actually layered over a red background, the color of the barn. The vintage Mustang car is a piece of nostalgia and begs the question, whose car is that, and why is it parked in front of a Mennonite barn? The ring-necked pheasant in the foreground is a very striking bird. It was once native to Manitoulin, but has been recently reintroduced. The appearance of the pheasant in this painting isn't a coincidence. Anong collects stamps from all over the world, and the pheasant is painted after a British stamp bearing a William Morris pattern called the Strawberry Thief. Pheasant, like Migwans, is also an Anishinaabe name. And I'm going to go back around the room to this painting, which is called Mountain Lake. Mountain Lake has some very subtle elements that might not appear obvious at first glance. Although the references to Carl Beam's various ways to travel in North America are seen in the space shuttle, I think it's a space shuttle or a rocket, and the dye transfer technique are there, the stillness of the water in the foreground draws you into a scene that is very nearly a dreamscape. And I'll give you a little bit better view of some of the elements of this painting. There's a turtle, there's a card, and some strange people from photographs, I think, and some other very interesting photographs done with the dye transfer technique in the corners of the painting. Okay, I'm going to take you over to Red Mangrove now. Red Mangrove is a bit of an anomaly. Although the usual elements of Anong's paintings are all there, the red sky reflecting in the blue water, birds, eggs, mysterious mountains in the background, it's about mangroves, and mangroves are not found on Manitoulin Island. Mangroves are coastal wetlands found in tropical and subtropical regions. And most of them are endangered or under pressure from shrimp farming or similar habitat destruction. So why mangroves, and what do they mean? Are they a stand-in for endangered species? Are we meant to long for tropical climates? Or are they another reference to a Peter Doig Trinidad painting? And I don't know the answer to that. Your interpretation here is as good as mine. Okay, I'm going to take you over to the largest painting in the room. This is the largest and most complex of the paintings in the exhibit. It's called Deluge. I'm going to give you a horizontal view so you can see how big it is. There we go. I'm quite a ways away from it, at least 10 feet. The largest and most complex of the paintings in this exhibition is this one, Deluge. Deluge was created in 2019, and Anong made all of the paints for this work herself. Deluge is a painting about Anong's life, as near as I can tell, although she wouldn't tell me what all the symbols in it were. The bears are very significant. They are grizzly bears fishing for salmon, and they represent abundance. The dye transfer birds swoop upwards in the sky, and unusually, Anong herself is present as a tiny figure in the foreground. There are teepee-like structures, and the painting includes the space shuttle again, connected to the birds overhead. There is lots to explore in this painting, and I invite you to come to Campbell House and experience it and the rest of the exhibition for yourselves. Thank you for taking this tour of the exhibit with me this evening. We will now switch over to the regular Zoom format so that you, the audience, can ask questions. Anong Beam joins us from her home at Chagrin First Nation. Thank you.
I really appreciate the introduction by Elka and, oh, final. I started out making oil paints, and I now make watercolor paints, and the process is pretty different for every color. I make about 40 colors now that I have available for sale, but I have at least another 40 that I make myself, and I make them from everything from brown from soot from pine in Killarney forests and to other things that are around. And I'm going to give a talk next Thursday all about paint making and how I came to it and a lot more of that. Oh, yeah, I read when I'm making paints, I can match colors, but the colors that you make, if it's something seasonal, it is different. Like you only have a certain window of time to get certain colors out of different areas. Or like right now, I had a big rush to get a certain kind of shale from Ice Lake because soon that's going to freeze over and I won't have access to it anymore. My favorite piece currently on display, I think my favorite piece is always whatever the last one was that I did, because I have a great fondness for them. Then I start doing the next one and I'm fully engaged with that one. But I really love the Mennonite barn one because I had never given grass and fields such a focus the same way I have with water. So that was really fun to get into painting a full green expanse and really focus on all of the curves of leaves, and really found out that it was quite a lot like painting water. And you see that when you see fields of wheat or the way things move like that in the wind. And some of the symbols, my mom and dad were both artists, and they had practices that were heavily photo based. So from my earliest memories, they carried me along with them everywhere they went, and I just kind of picked up their habits. And one of them was that they kept image banks called working images. So as they were going through daily life, if a photograph really spoke to them from a newspaper or a piece of packaging, or all the different places that images jump out to us in our day-to-day, they would snip it out or tear it out or photocopy it or photograph it and keep the image. And that's everything from stamps to all kinds of things. So I've been keeping working images like that since I was a little kid, and quite a lot of the images come from stamp collections and found images, like it's like a tip of the hat to the strawberry thief pattern that's in the Mennonite barn. I've really liked that stamp and that image ever since it must be 1985 when I got it. Oh, the Peony Paintings. I remember really vividly some very strong color experiences when I was a kid. And one of them was peonies. That we moved into a house in Peterborough, and our neighbor had a huge bed of peonies. that was probably 10 or 15 feet by 4 feet deep, and it abutted on our fence. And we had one picket fence that would swing loose, and I used to climb underneath through the fence, and I would lay on the ground underneath the peonies and look up at the sky. And so the entire field in front of me was all backlit red, pink peony petals. And it was really such a spectacular experience that I really think about it even now. And the peonies I just painted from memory. But most of the time I'll have a photo reference, especially something that I don't feel very confident about, like I've started to paint cars and buildings. Deluge was really fun to paint because I had just moved into a very small studio. And because the studio was so much smaller than my last one, I wanted to, I painted a few reasonably sized canvases, and then I wanted to assuage myself that I still had the ability to paint a real monster painting if I wanted to. And I stretched out canvas the full size of one of the walls, and I did worked on it there. It was my first painting in a real new phase of my life too, so I could really kind of stretch out and enjoy taking my time and building up a real density of image. And that's something that I've really enjoyed these past few years, probably the past five or 6 years, is taking more time and building a really a visually dense surface. And that's been a lot of fun with the dye transfer and with photographs and being able to layer them. Then I can have one photograph and behind it see another photograph and kind of start to build up a surface like that. And it's been interesting lately. My last few paintings haven't had any photographic detail, so it's nice to try to see how I can approximate that without using photographs. And that's been really nice. Some of the symbols that I use. Oh, there's a viewer. Oh, I really like the Cadillac painting with the Campbell House wallpaper. I think it looks. I think it just looks great, and I think Deluge is accessible to all people. I really like how painting has a chance to speak to everybody beyond age or inclination. For the arts can be very remote at times, and I really like the ability of painting to create a window that's open, and small children can see certain paintings, even if they're not representational, if they're more abstract, and just the combination of colors, or even like Rothko color fields, it just creates such a sensation. Yeah, I feel that way about it too. There's a picture of me on the top of a little, that was so fun. I had put myself in that picture on Deluge. On the top, I'm on a cliff at the Cup and Saucer, which is the very top of the Niagara escarpment. And I'm looking north in doing a copy of Caspar Friedrich painting. He painted someone called Wanderer in Sea of Fog. And he's standing kind of looking off that way. So I copied that stance. And then below that is it's a hydroelectric pulp mill that's in Espanola, north of here, and it has a really beautiful dam that funnels water through it. It's really striking. I drive past it all the time in La Cloche Mountain Range, driving back to the Trans-Canada. And then to the left of that, there's a full moon that I saw in the rearview mirror of my car driving down a road. And so there was rain on the mirror, and the full moon was behind it, and then the highway and the leaves, that's in the left, and it comes down past some grizzly bears, maple trees, and spawning salmon, and comes around. Yeah, there it is. That was really fun to take images of spawning salmon and the density of fish. And I've really enjoyed taking photographs and then continuing them to stitch them into the next photograph, so that when you're looking at it, you can't really tell where a photograph ends and where the painting starts. So central right there is these are migratory maps from National Geographic's in the 70s, showing the migratory patterns of different bird species, and they're mirrored and back and forth from the top left down. There. Okay. Yeah, on that part there is a photo transfer. The darkest part in the center is pine trees and a helicopter. And that was from a photograph taken. Then right there in the center is the moon coming through with some rain. Yeah, the dye transfer process is really just that when paint, different kinds of paint, when it's wet and then a photograph is put face into it, it's kind of like, it's not decoupage or collage, because in collage the photograph stays on its paper and you rip and combine these papers. And then with these kinds of techniques, the photographs are embedded face first into the wet paint, and then the paper is removed off of the back, and it leaves the photograph inside the paint. And then it gives it a very transparent quality. So then in collage and decoupage, the photograph sits static on the surface and you can't see what's behind it. So you would stick another photograph on it, but you wouldn't be able to see behind that either. So you end up building like this. When you do it this way, the photograph becomes transparent and integrated into the surface of the painting, so that if this was a photograph, if I was a photograph on top of a photograph of the trees, you would see trees right through me. And that's what helps create more of an illusion of not really being able to tell where a photograph of the salmon, where it stops. It's actually quite small, and then the expanded forest, or a lot of these photographs are just continued paintings that stitch them together into this kind of landscape. And it is quite big. It's about 8 feet by 12 feet in wide. And I really love painting that size, because you have you get such a great feeling when you stand in front of it. It's very experiential, and it's like you're standing in front of a huge window, or you feel like you're part of that environment. It's interesting with doing paintings like that, because I was mentioning this to Elka, that I think stamp collecting, in my all the twists and turns my life has had so far, you don't hang on to a lot of things, but I still have my stamp collection from 1983 or thereabouts, and I think that it was really, just really stuck with me that for a stamp to be successful, it has to communicate so much in such a tiny area. It has to be really well proportioned, and the composition and the colors and the subject matter, everything has to be bang on. Otherwise, you wouldn't even look at it. You have such a tiny window to make an impact. So oddly enough, when I do the large paintings, I plan them out as sketches in a small moleskin. So each preparatory sketch for all of the large paintings is about the size of a matchbook. And I plan it out on there, and then I go and I fill in the landscape of it from it's more of the general composition and planning that out first. And that, it depends what you're planning on doing with it, and what kind of painting you're gonna do. Like when I did that one was stapled to the wall, and there's a couple of issues that come up. One, if you staple it to the wall and it's not really thick canvas, then you will laminate your canvas to the wall. And when you go to peel it off, you could take a good chunk of the wall with you. The paint, when it dries to wood or if drywall, it'll just peel it off. There's some times where I've done that and pulled back. The back of the Mennonite barn painting has some splinters on it, I'm sure, because I painted, it's quite thin, and I painted it on stretched out on a wall. So that's a bit of a PSA for that. But it's nice to paint on a wall if you have one that you can kind of sacrifice for art's sake, because then you can really lean on it while you're working, and you don't have to be quite as precious and removed from it, but you can land on it and really work on sections without the way when something is stretched, you have to not put pressure on it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I just wanted to thank everybody then for coming out and for looking remotely at these paintings in this really unexpected place. And I'm so glad that there is such an unusual place in Toronto, and that people like Elka and Liz are filling it up with art and inviting people to see it. I think it really brings just a beautiful spot, and I can't wait to see it in person. And if you're interested more in paint making and kind of those things, I'm going to be giving a talk next Thursday that is about my family, my more cultural kind of background and attachments to color and language and paint making just in general. Which is really one of my favorite topics, so I'll just go. Thank you, Liz. I so appreciate it. And thank you, Jennifer. Thanks for turning up to my first Zoom chat like this. It's so appreciated.
I just wanted to thank everyone for coming to our little show tonight. Thank you so much, Anong, for answering all those questions. Next week we have Anong doing a presentation on paint making and how she came to make her own paints and how her paints are made and what she does with them. So that will be next Thursday morning from 10 till about 11. We also have, in December, we have Shirley Medill from Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery, who will be speaking about contemporary Indigenous art and Anung's art in the context of that. So thank you for coming, and good night.